Even the Hitmen said no. Targeting humans meant certain death. Part 1. The contract. The void market was not the kind of place you found by accident. It existed in the forgotten corners of a space station called Nexus 7, hidden behind rusted cargo doors and protected by bribes that have been flowing for generations. This was where the galaxy's most dangerous individuals came to do business. Assassins, bounty hunters, smugglers, and mercenaries gathered here under dim lights and the constant hum of failing ventilation systems. Vex Torani had been coming to this place for almost 40 years. He was a Selvari, a reptilian species known for their patience and precision. His scales had faded from bright green to a dull gray over the decades, but his eyes remained sharp. 217 confirmed kills across 12 star systems had made him a legend in certain circles. He never rushed. He never failed. And he never took a job without knowing exactly what he was getting into. Tonight, he sat in his usual booth near the back wall, nursing a drink he had no intention of finishing. Across from him sat a hooded figure who had been trying to remain mysterious for the past 10 minutes. Vex found it almost amusing. In his experience, the ones who tried hardest to hide their identity were usually the easiest to read. The hooded figure finally spoke. His voice carried the accent of Korvathi nobility, that particular blend of arrogance and impatience that came from generations of wealth and power. "I have a contract," the figure said. "The payment is generous. Very generous." Vex tilted his head slightly. "I am listening." The figure slid a data chip across the table. "The target is a diplomat, currently stationed on Meridian 5. I need him eliminated within 30 standard days." Vex picked up the chip and examined it without plugging it into his reader. "Species?" There was a pause. The hooded figure seemed to hesitate, which told Vex everything he needed to know even before the answer came. "Human." Vex set the chip down gently. He pushed it back across the table with one clawed finger. "No." The hooded figure leaned forward. "You have not even seen the payment amount. I am offering 500,000 galactic credits. Clean transfer. Untraceable. No. 1 million. Vex stood up from the booth. His movements were slow and deliberate, the way a predator moves when it has already decided to walk away from a fight. "There is no number," he said quietly. "There is no amount of credits in this galaxy or any other that would make me take a contract on a human. Find someone else. Or better yet, abandon this foolish idea entirely." The hooded figure reached up and pulled back his hood, revealing the pale blue skin and silver eyes of a Korvathi noble. His name was Lord Drennis, and his face was twisted with barely contained fury. "Do you know who I am?" he demanded. "Do you know what I can do to your reputation?" Vex allowed himself a small smile. "I know exactly who you are, Lord Drennis. I knew the moment you sat down. The fact that you are willing to show your face tells me you are desperate. Desperate men make poor decisions. This contract is a poor decision. I suggest you reconsider before you do something you cannot undo." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd before Drennis could respond. Lord Drennis sat alone in the booth, his hands trembling with anger. The human diplomat Daniel Carter had humiliated him in front of the entire Galactic Council 6 months ago. Carter had exposed Drennis's illegal mining operations in a protected system, costing him billions in seized assets and destroying his political standing. Drennis had lost everything that mattered to him: his wealth, his influence, his honor. He wanted Daniel Carter dead. Not just dead. He wanted him to suffer. Over the next 3 hours, Drennis approached every assassin he could find in the void market. He spoke to a Krethian sniper named Torval who had killed planetary governors. The answer was no. He found a Malvik poisoner who specialized in untraceable toxins. She laughed in his face and walked away. He even tracked down a thin blade specialist, a massive four-armed warrior who had never refused a contract in his life. The Thin listened to the offer, then shook his head slowly. "I have killed many things," the warrior said. "Soldiers, politicians, crime lords, monsters, but I do not kill humans. No one with any sense kills humans. Why?" Drennis demanded. "They are soft. They are weak. They have no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. What makes them so frightening?" The Thin stared at him for a long moment. "If you have to ask that question, you do not understand what humans truly are. And if you do not understand, then you are already dead. You simply do not know it yet." He walked away, leaving Drennis alone once again. By midnight, Drennis was ready to give up. He had been rejected by over a dozen professional killers, each one refusing the moment they heard the word human. It made no sense to him. Humans were one of the younger species in the galaxy. They had only been part of the Galactic Council for 2 centuries. They had no empire, no great military fleet, no reputation for conquest, and yet every assassin in the Void Market treated them like they were death itself. Drennis was about to leave when he noticed a young Selvari sitting alone at the bar. She was thin, her scales still carrying the bright green color of youth. Her clothes were worn and patched in several places. She was nursing the cheapest drink on the menu and watching the crowd with hungry eyes. Drennis approached her carefully. "You are looking for work?" The young Selvari turned to face him. Her name was Kira-san, and she had been trying to break into the assassination business for 2 years with little success. The established killers did not take her seriously. The good contracts always went to someone else. She was desperate for credits, desperate to prove herself, desperate to survive. "Depends on the job," she said cautiously. Drennis smiled. "The job is simple. 1 target, 1 million credits. Clean transfer upon confirmation of death." Kira's eyes widened. 1 million credits was more money than she had ever seen in her life. It was enough to buy her own ship, enough to set herself up properly, enough to finally become someone who mattered. Who was the target? A human diplomat named Daniel Carter. "He is stationed on Meridian 5. I need him dead within 30 days. Kira hesitated. She had heard stories about humans, of course. Everyone had. But she had never actually met one, never seen what they could do. The story seemed exaggerated, the kind of tales older assassins told to scare newcomers. She was young. She was hungry. She was foolish. "I will take the contract," she said. Lord Drennis handed her the data chip with a satisfied smile. He did not care if she succeeded or failed. He did not care if she lived or died. She was a tool, nothing more. And tools were meant to be used. As Kira-san left the Void Market that night, clutching the data chip that would change her life forever, she did not notice the old Selvari watching her from the shadows. Vex Tarani recognized the look in her eyes. He had seen it many times before in young assassins who did not know any better. He considered warning her. He considered stopping her. In the end, he simply shook his head and looked away. Some lessons could only be learned the hard way. And the lesson about humans was the hardest lesson of all. Even the Hitmen said no. Targeting humans meant certain death. Part 2. The warning Meridian 5 was a neutral world. One of the few places in the galaxy where species that had fought wars against each other could sit at the same table and talk. The planet was covered in vast oceans and scattered islands, each one hosting diplomatic compounds from different civilizations. The weather was always mild. The food was always acceptable. And the security was supposed to be tight enough to prevent exactly the kind of thing Kira-san was planning to do. She arrived on a transport ship carrying legitimate cargo, using false documents that had cost her a significant portion of her advance payment. For 3 days, she did nothing but watch and learn. She rented a small room in the commercial district, ate cheap food, and spent her nights studying the layout of the human diplomatic compound. Daniel Carter was her target. According to the data chip Lord Drennis had given her, Carter was 52 years old, a career diplomat who had spent most of his life negotiating trade agreements and resolving disputes between species. He had a wife back on Earth and 2 grown children. He liked to walk in the evenings. He preferred local cuisine over human food. He seemed to have no security detail, no weapons, and no combat training. On paper, he looked like the easiest target Kira had ever seen. She watched him go about his daily routine. Morning meetings with alien delegates. Lunch at a small restaurant near the waterfront. Afternoon sessions at the council building. Evening walks through the diplomatic quarter, often alone. Often stopping to admire the sunset over the ocean. He was unremarkable, soft, slow, completely unaware of the danger he was in, or so Kira thought. On the 4th night, she returned to her rented room to find someone waiting for her. He was old, older than anyone Kira had ever seen. His silver scales had turned almost white with age, and his movements were careful and deliberate. He sat in the only chair in the room, watching her with eyes that had seen more death than most planets. Kira reached for her weapon, but the old Selvari raised one hand in a gesture of peace. "If I wanted you dead," he said calmly, "you would have been dead before you opened the door. Sit down, young one. We need to talk." Kira did not sit, but she did not draw her weapon either. "Who are you?" "My name is Morik Venn. You may have heard of me." She had heard of him. Everyone in the assassination business had heard of Morik Venn. He was a legend, one of the greatest killers in galactic history. He had retired decades ago, and most people assumed he was dead. "What do you want?" Kira asked carefully. "I want to save your life," Morik said. "I heard about the contract you accepted. I came here to warn you. Walk away. Return the payment. Disappear somewhere far away and never think about this job again." Kira felt a flash of anger. She was tired of being treated like a child. Tired of older assassins looking down on her. "You came all this way to tell me not to kill one human? One soft, slow, defenseless human?" Morik's expression did not change. "I came all this way because I have seen what happens when humans are not so defenseless." "Sit down, Kira-san. Let me tell you a story." Something in his voice made her obey. She sat on the edge of the bed and listened. 15 years ago, Morik began, there was an organization called the Crimson Syndicate. You are too young to remember them, but at their peak, they were the most feared assassin guild in the galaxy. 800 members spread across 4 star systems. They had killed senators, generals, crime lords, and kings. No target was beyond their reach. No security could stop them. He paused, his old eyes growing distant with memory. One day, they received a contract. A wealthy merchant wanted a human trader named Samuel Hayes eliminated. Samuel was interfering with the merchant's business, undercutting his prices, stealing his customers. The contract included Samuel's wife, Linda, and their 2 children. The merchant wanted the entire family gone. He paid very well. Kira frowned. What happened? The syndicate sent 12 of their best operatives. 12 highly trained killers who had never failed a mission. They tracked the Hayes family to a small colony world. They planned the operation for weeks. They executed it perfectly. Morik's voice dropped lower. The entire Hayes family was killed in a single night. Samuel, Linda, and both children. The syndicate collected their payment and moved on to other contracts. They thought that was the end of it. He looked directly at Kira. It was not the end. It was the beginning. Kira felt a chill run down her spine despite herself. What do you mean? Within 1 week, The 12 operatives who carried out the mission were dead. Not captured. Not imprisoned. Dead. Their bodies were found across different systems, each one killed in a different way. Some were shot. Some were poisoned. Some simply disappeared and were later found floating in space. Morek leaned forward slightly. The syndicate leadership was shocked, but they were not afraid. They had hundreds of members. They had resources, connections, safe houses across the galaxy. They thought they could hide. They thought they could fight back. He shook his head slowly. They were wrong. The humans did not stop with the 12 operatives. They traced every connection, every payment, every communication. They found the handlers who gave the orders. They found the financiers who funded the operation. They found the informants who provided intelligence. One by one, they hunted them down. Kira's mouth had gone dry. How many? All of them, Morek said simply. Within 6 standard months, every single member of the Crimson Syndicate was dead. All 800 of them. The largest assassin guild in galactic history was completely erased. Not defeated. Not scattered. Erased, as if they had never existed at all. The room was silent for a long moment. The humans did not do this with armies, Morek continued. They did not do this with fleets or weapons of mass destruction. They did it with patience. They did it with intelligence. They did it with a relentless, unstoppable determination that the galaxy had never seen before. They did not care how long it took. They did not care how far they had to go. They simply kept coming until there was no one left. Kira tried to find her voice. That was one incident. One time. It was not one time, Morek said. It has happened before. It will happen again. Every species in the galaxy has learned this lesson sooner or later. The Krethians learned it. The Malvik learned it. The Them learned it. Humans look weak because they choose to look weak. They appear harmless because it serves their purposes to appear harmless. But when you threaten their people, when you harm their families, when you make them your enemy, they become something else entirely. He stood up slowly, his old bones creaking with the effort. They become patient. They become thorough. And they never, ever stop. Kira stared at him. Why are you telling me this? Why do you care what happens to me? Morek walked toward the door. Because I was young once. Because I made mistakes once. And because I have seen too many promising assassins throw their lives away by underestimating the wrong species. He paused at the doorway and looked back at her one final time. Walk away. Kira-san, take the loss. Find another contract. Because if you go through with this, you will not just be risking your own life. You will be risking the lives of everyone you have ever worked with, everyone you have ever cared about, everyone who has ever helped you. Humans do not believe in proportional response. They believe in making sure no one ever tries the same thing again. Then he was gone, leaving Kira alone with her thoughts. She sat in the darkness for a long time, thinking about what he had said. Part of her wanted to believe it was just an old man's exaggeration, the kind of story veterans told to scare newcomers. Part of her wanted to walk away, just as he had suggested. But 1 million credits was sitting in her account. 1 million credits that could change her life forever. And Daniel Carter was just one soft, slow, defenseless human who had no idea she was coming. How hard could it really be? She made her decision before the sun rose over Meridian 5. She would complete the contract. She would prove everyone wrong. She would become the assassin who killed a human and live to tell about it. It was the worst decision she had ever made. Even the Hitmen said no. Targeting humans meant certain death. Part 3. The attempt. Kira spent the next week preparing for the perfect strike. She studied the human diplomatic compound from every angle. She mapped the security systems, identified the patrol patterns, and found the blind spots in their surveillance network. She acquired a neural disruptor from a black market dealer, a sophisticated weapon that could shut down a brain from 50 meters away without leaving any physical evidence. To any medical examiner, it would look like natural organ failure. The opportunity came during a cultural exchange event at the main diplomatic hall. Representatives from a dozen species would be attending, and Daniel Carter was scheduled to give a speech about interspecies cooperation. The hall would be crowded. The security would be focused on the main floor, and the upper balconies would be relatively unguarded. It was perfect. Kira infiltrated the building through a service entrance, using forged credentials that identified her as catering staff. She slipped away from the kitchen during the chaos of meal preparation and made her way to the upper level. The balcony she had chosen offered a clear line of sight to the speaker's platform, with multiple escape routes and enough shadow to remain hidden. She settled into position and waited. Below her, the hall filled with delegates and diplomats, their conversations blending into a constant murmur of alien languages. The lighting was dim, focused on the central stage where the speakers would present. No one was looking up. No one suspected anything. Daniel Carter entered the hall precisely on schedule. He moved through the crowd with ease, shaking hands with alien delegates, exchanging pleasantries, smiling warmly at jokes Kira could not hear. He looked completely relaxed, completely unguarded, completely vulnerable. Kira raised the neural disruptor and aimed at his head. Her finger rested on the trigger. One squeeze, and it would be over. One squeeze, and she would be 1 million credits richer. One squeeze, and she would prove that all those stories about humans were nothing but exaggerated nonsense. Then Daniel Carter turned and looked directly at her. Not in her general direction. Not at the balcony. At her. His eyes met hers across the crowded hall with impossible precision. He did not shout. He did not run. He did not signal for help. He simply stood there, watching her, with an expression that was almost sad. Kira froze. Every instinct she had developed over years of training screamed at her to pull the trigger, to complete the mission, to eliminate the target before he could react. But something in his gaze held her motionless. It was the look of someone who had been expecting her, someone who had known about her presence for days, someone who was not afraid. Before she could process what was happening, she felt a presence behind her. Two figures had appeared on the balcony without making a single sound. She had not heard them approach. She had not sensed them at all. They were simply there, as if they had materialized from the shadows themselves. One of them removed the neural disruptor from her hand with a gentle but irresistible grip. The other placed a hand on her shoulder, not threatening, just guiding. They wore civilian clothes and carried no visible weapons, but Kira understood immediately that they could have ended her life at any moment. "Come with us," one of them said quietly. "Do not make a scene. Do not resist. You will not be harmed if you cooperate." Kira had no choice. She allowed herself to be led through a service corridor and into a small private room on the upper level. The door closed behind her, and she found herself alone with her captors. They did not restrain her. They did not threaten her. They simply stood near the door and waited. 10 minutes later, Daniel Carter entered the room. He looked older up close, with lines around his eyes and gray in his hair. But his movements were calm and controlled, and his expression was almost kind. He took a seat across from Kira and studied her for a long moment before speaking. "Kira-san," he said, 24 years old. Born on Selvari Prime. No parents on record, raised in the state system. Started working in the underworld at 16. First confirmed kill at 19. You have been trying to establish yourself as a professional assassin for the past 5 years with limited success. Kira stared at him. "How do you know all that?" "We know everything," Daniel said simply. We knew about the contract on my life within hours of it being placed. We identified you as the operative, tracked your arrival on Meridian 5, and monitored your surveillance activities. We knew about your meeting with Morik Ven. We knew you would choose the cultural event for your attempt. We knew exactly where you would position yourself. Then why did you let me get this far? Daniel leaned back in his chair. Because we needed to confirm you were working alone. Because we needed to understand the full scope of the threat. And because we wanted to give you a chance. A chance? A choice, Daniel corrected. Right now, you have two options. The first option is simple. You walk out of this building tonight. You return to Lord Drennis. You tell him the contract is void, that it cannot be completed, that no amount of money is worth what will happen if he continues down this path. Then you disappear. You never take another contract on a human. You never speak of what happened here. And you live the rest of your life in peace. Kira waited for him to continue. The second option is also simple, Daniel said. His voice remained calm, but something in his eyes grew colder. You refuse. You try to complete the contract. You try to harm me or my people or anyone associated with humanity. And then you face the consequences. What consequences? Daniel smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Have you ever heard of the Crimson Syndicate? Kira felt her stomach drop. Morik Ven told me the story. Then you know what we are capable of. What you may not understand is why we do it. He leaned forward slightly. Humans do not enjoy killing, Kira. We do not take pleasure in revenge. We do not hunt our enemies because it brings us satisfaction. We do it because we have learned, through thousands of years of painful history, that the only way to protect our people is to make the cost of harming them absolutely unthinkable. He gestured toward the door. If you refuse our offer, we will not simply kill you. We will trace every connection you have ever made. We will identify every person who has ever helped you, trained you, funded you, or worked with you. We will dismantle your entire network, piece by piece, until there is nothing left. Not because we hate you, not because we want revenge, but because we need the galaxy to understand that threatening humanity always ends the same way. Kira could barely breathe. Why are you offering me mercy at all? Because mercy is always our first choice, Daniel said. Violence is expensive. Violence creates enemies. Violence damages our reputation as a species that prefers negotiation over conflict. We would rather let you walk away and spread the word about what happens when you target humans than create another bloody example. He stood up and walked toward the door. But understand this clearly. Mercy is only offered once. If you accept our offer and then betray us, if you take another contract on a human or help someone else do the same, there will be no second chance. There will be no negotiation. There will only be consequences. He opened the door and gestured for her to leave. The choice is yours. Kira sat motionless for a long moment. Her mind raced through every option, every possibility, every potential outcome. She thought about the 1,000,000 credits sitting in her account. She thought about Lord Drennis and his demands. She thought about Morik Ven and his warning. She thought about the calm certainty in Daniel Carter's eyes. The absolute confidence that came from knowing exactly what his species was capable of. Then she stood up and walked toward the door. I will return the payment, she said quietly. I will tell Drennis the contract is void. And I will never target a human again. Daniel nodded once. A wise decision. Safe travels, Kira-san. She left the diplomatic compound that night and caught the first transport off Meridian 5. She did not look back. She did not hesitate. She simply ran as fast and as far as she could, away from the humans and their terrifying patience. She had been given mercy. She was smart enough to take it. Lord Drennis, unfortunately, was not so smart. Even the Hitmen said no. Targeting humans meant certain death. Part 4. The consequence. Lord Drennis was not accustomed to failure. He came from a family that had ruled their sector of Calvathi space for 17 generations. He had grown up believing that money could solve any problem, that power could overcome any obstacle, and that his desires were more important than anyone else's concerns. When Kira-san returned to tell him the contract was void, he refused to accept it. "You are a coward," he spat at her. "Just like all the others. I hired you because you were supposed to be hungry, desperate, willing to do what the established assassins would not. And now you come back with excuses?" Kira stood her ground. "They knew everything. They knew about the contract before. I even arrived on Meridian 5. They let me get close, just to prove they could stop me any time they wanted. This is not a target you can eliminate, Lord Drennis. This is a trap waiting to close on whoever is foolish enough to step into it." Nonsense. One human diplomat with a handful of security personnel cannot possibly be. "It is not about the security personnel," Kira interrupted. "It is about what happens after." The Crimson Syndicate thought they were untouchable too. 800 professional killers spread across 4 systems. They were all dead within 6 months. Every single one of them. Drennis waved his hand dismissively. Ancient history. Exaggerated stories meant to scare children. I spoke to Morik Venn. He confirmed. "I do not care what some retired assassin thinks," Drennis snapped. "I want Daniel Carter dead. If you will not do it, I will find someone who will." Kira stared at him for a long moment. She thought about warning him again, about explaining in detail what she had seen in that private room, about describing the calm certainty in Daniel Carter's eyes. But she could see it would be useless. Lord Drennis was not listening. He was not capable of listening. His pride had been wounded, and he would not rest until he had satisfied his desire for revenge. "Then I am returning your payment," she said finally. "All of it. And I strongly suggest you reconsider this path before it destroys you." She transferred the credits back to his account before he could argue. Then she walked out of his estate and never looked back. Lord Drennis fumed for 3 days. He refused to eat. He refused to sleep. He spent every waking hour obsessing over Daniel Carter and the humiliation the human had caused him. When his advisors suggested he abandon the vendetta, he dismissed them. When his remaining allies warned him about the risks, he cut ties with them. In the end, he decided that the problem was not the contract itself. The problem was the quality of personnel he had been hiring. Assassins were too cautious, too bound by their unwritten rules about which targets were acceptable. What he needed was raw force. What he needed was a military operation. He contacted a Krethian mercenary company called the Iron Fang. They were not subtle. They were not elegant. They were simply brutal, efficient, and willing to do anything for the right price. 12 veteran soldiers, each one equipped with military-grade weapons and armor, each one experienced in planetary assault operations. The commander was a scarred veteran named Torlik. He listened to Drennis's proposal without expression. "A human diplomatic compound," Torlik repeated. "You want us to breach a human diplomatic compound on a neutral world and eliminate a specific target?" "Yes, I will pay triple your standard rate." Torlik considered for a moment. "We have never operated against humans before. There are stories. Stories are for cowards," Drennis said impatiently. "I am offering you enough credits to retire your entire company. Are you interested or not?" The mercenary studied the Calvathi noble carefully. He saw the desperation, the fury, the complete unwillingness to accept reality. He also saw an opportunity that might never come again. "We are interested," he said finally. "Transfer the payment. We will begin operations immediately." The attack came 3 nights later. The Iron Fang approached the human diplomatic compound under cover of darkness. They had studied the layout, identified the security systems, and planned their entry with military precision. 12 soldiers moved through the shadows like ghosts, their weapons ready, their communications silent. They breached the perimeter fence without triggering any alarms. They crossed the outer courtyard without encountering any resistance. They reached the main building and prepared to enter through a service door that their intelligence indicated was lightly guarded. For approximately 90 seconds, they believed they had the upper hand. Then the lights went out, not just in the building, not just in the compound. Every light source within 500 meters suddenly died, plunging the entire area into absolute darkness. The mercenaries' night vision systems flickered and failed. Their communications equipment produced nothing but static. Their weapons targeting systems went offline, and then the humans came. There were only 4 of them. The leader was a woman named Claire Dunn, and she moved through the darkness like she had been born in it. Her team did not use flashlights or illumination devices. They did not need them. They knew exactly where every mercenary was standing, exactly how they would react, exactly what they would do. The first 2 mercenaries went down before anyone realized they were under attack. No shots were fired. No alarms were raised. They simply collapsed, unconscious, their weapons removed and their communications destroyed. The remaining 10 tried to form a defensive position, but they could not see their attackers. They could not hear them. They could only feel the occasional rush of air as someone moved past them. The sudden impact of a precisely placed strike. The helpless confusion of fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. At once thought, it was over in less than 4 minutes, when the lights came back on. All 12 mercenaries were lying on the ground. They were alive. They were uninjured, except for minor bruises and the after effects of stun weapons. But they were completely, utterly defeated. Claire Dunn stood over Torlik, who was struggling to regain consciousness. She waited patiently until his eyes focused, then crouched down beside him. "Can you hear me?" she asked calmly. Torlik nodded weakly. "Good. Listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once." Her voice was soft, almost gentle, but there was steel underneath. "You were hired by Lord Drennis to attack this compound. We know who paid you. We know how much he paid you. We know where he is hiding." She helped him sit up against a wall. "We are going to let you live. All 12 of you. We are going to let you walk away from here with your weapons and your equipment and your wounded pride. And in exchange, you're going to do something for us." "What?" Torlik managed to ask. "Tell everyone what happened here tonight. Tell your colleagues, your competitors, your friends, and your enemies. Tell them that 12 veteran soldiers with military equipment attacked a human compound. And they were neutralized in under 4 minutes without the humans suffering a single casualty." She stood up and looked down at him. "Tell them this was restraint. Tell them we could have killed every single one of you, and we chose not to. Tell them that we prefer peace, but we are very, very good at war. And tell them that anyone who targets humans should expect the same treatment or worse." She walked away, disappearing into the compound with her team. Torlik sat in the darkness for a long time, his mind racing. He had fought in dozens of conflicts across the galaxy. He had faced opponents with superior numbers, superior technology, and superior training. He had never been afraid. He was afraid now. The Iron Fang left Meridian 5 that night. They did not complete the contract. They did not attempt to attack again. They simply gathered their wounded pride and their unconscious soldiers and retreated as fast as their ships could carry them. And when they returned to Krethian space, Torlik did exactly what Claire Dunn had asked. He told everyone who would listen about what had happened. He described the darkness, the silence, the terrifying efficiency of the human security team. He explained that they had been defeated without the humans even trying, that the entire engagement had been a demonstration of capability rather than a genuine fight. Within weeks, the story had spread across the underworld. Within months, it had become legend. And Lord Drennis, hiding in his secret safe house, realized that he had made a terrible mistake. Even the Hitmen said no. Targeting humans meant certain death. Part 5. The Reckoning Lord. Drennis had prepared for violence. He had prepared for assassins. He had prepared for military strikes and covert operations and all of traditional methods enemies used to destroy each other in the galaxy. He had not prepared for this. The first sign of trouble came when his financial accounts were frozen. Not seized by any government, not blocked by any court order, but simply frozen. Every transaction he attempted was rejected. Every credit he tried to access was unavailable. His wealth, the foundation of all his power, had become nothing more than numbers on a screen that refused to move. Then the documents started appearing. Someone had compiled a comprehensive record of every illegal activity Lord Drennis had ever engaged in. The illegal mining operations he had hidden from the Galactic Council. The bribes he had paid to government officials. The rivals he had eliminated through assassination contracts. The evidence of corruption and abuse that stretched back decades. This information did not go to law enforcement. It went to the galactic press. Within days, Drennis was the most infamous figure in Korvathi society. His family publicly disowned him, releasing statements that condemned his actions and distanced themselves from his crimes. His political allies abandoned him, rushing to protect their own reputations before they could be dragged down with him. His business partners terminated every contract and agreement, cutting all ties to the disgraced noble. He fled his estate before the authorities could arrive. He had maintained several hidden safe houses across different systems, prepared for exactly this kind of emergency. He retreated to the most remote one, a small facility on an uninhabited moon in an obscure system that no one knew about. At least, that was what he believed. 3 months passed. 3 months of isolation, of watching his empire crumble through intercepted news feeds, of knowing that everything he had built over a lifetime was being systematically destroyed. He lived on emergency rations and recycled water, surrounded by the silence of an empty moon, waiting for the moment when the humans would come to finish him. That moment came on a quiet night when he was beginning to think they might have forgotten about him. He was sitting in the main room of his safe house when the door opened. He had not heard any ship approaching. He had not received any warning from his security systems. The door simply opened, and Daniel Carter walked in. The human diplomat looked exactly as he had on Meridian 5, calm, unhurried, completely at ease despite being alone. In the safe house of a man who had tried to have him killed, Drennis reached for the weapon he kept beside his chair. But Daniel shook his head slightly. "Do not bother," he said. "I am not here to hurt you. I am not even here to threaten you. I simply wanted to deliver a message in person." He pulled up a chair and sat down across from the disgraced noble. "You tried to have me killed," Daniel continued. "You hired assassins. When they refused or failed, you hired mercenaries. You spent millions of credits and months of effort trying to end my life because I exposed your crimes to the Galactic Council." Drennis said nothing. There was nothing to say. "We could have killed you," Daniel said. "We could have sent a team to eliminate you at any point during the past 3 months. We knew where you were hiding before you even arrived. We have been monitoring your communications, your supply shipments, your every movement. There has not been a single moment when you were beyond our reach." He leaned forward slightly. "But we decided not to kill you. Death would be too quick, too clean, too easy. Death would turn you into a martyr for some, a warning for others. but ultimately just another corpse in a galaxy full of corpses. His voice remained calm, almost conversational. Instead, we decided to make you an example. Every crime you ever committed has been exposed. Every ally you ever had has abandoned you. How did you? Every credit you ever owned has been frozen or seized. Your family has disowned you. Your government has issued warrants for your arrest. You are now the most wanted criminal in Korvathi space, hunted by your own people, rejected by everyone who once supported you. Daniel stood up and walked toward the door. You will spend the rest of your life running, Lord Drennis. Running from the authorities who want to imprison you. Running from the criminals who want to collect the bounties on your head. Running from the shame of being remembered as the fool who thought he could target humanity and win. He paused at the doorway. That is the message I wanted to deliver. That is what happens when you threaten our people. Not death. Something worse than death. A life spent as a reminder to everyone else that there are consequences for making enemies of humans. Then he was gone, leaving Drennis alone in his safe house, surrounded by silence and the ruins of everything he had once been. The story of Lord Drennis spread across the galaxy in the months that followed. It became a cautionary tale, whispered in the same dark corners where the legend of the Crimson Syndicate was still remembered. The fool who tried to kill a human. The noble who lost everything. The reminder that humanity's reach extended far beyond their small corner of the galaxy. 1 year later, the Void Market was as busy as ever. Assassins and mercenaries and criminals of every species gathered in its dim corridors, conducting the business that polite society refused to acknowledge. The same faces occupied the same booths, nursing the same drinks, taking the same jobs they had always taken. Vex Torani was sitting in his usual spot when a new client approached. The client was nervous, fidgeting with a data chip, clearly uncomfortable in this environment. He was young and wealthy, and completely out of his depth. I have a contract, the client said. The payment is substantial. Very substantial. I need someone eliminated. Someone who has caused my family great harm. Vex tilted his head. Species? The client hesitated. That hesitation told Vex everything he needed to know. Human, the client admitted finally. Vex did not respond immediately. He simply stood up from his booth. Across the establishment, every assassin who had heard the conversation did the same. One by one, they rose from their seats and walked toward the exits, leaving their drinks unfinished and their negotiations abandoned. The client watched in confusion as the entire room emptied. Within minutes, he was standing alone in a silent establishment. His contract unfulfilled, his credits useless. The bartender, a grizzled veteran who had been running this place for 40 years, walked over and collected the abandoned glasses. He had seen this scene play out dozens of times since the stories about humanity had started spreading. Young clients with old grudges, convinced that their money could buy them revenge against the species that everyone else had learned to avoid. Let me give you some advice, the bartender said quietly. Find another target. Any other target. Because in this galaxy, there are jobs that pay well, and there are jobs that let you live. Targeting humans is never both. The client opened his mouth to argue, but the bartender was already walking away. He stood alone in the empty establishment for a long time, the weight of his useless data chip heavy in his hand. Around him, the silence seemed to echo with all the warnings he had ignored, all the stories he had dismissed, all the lessons he had refused to learn. Somewhere across the galaxy, humanity continued its peaceful existence. They traded with other species. They negotiated agreements. They built relationships and resolved disputes and generally behaved like the reasonable, civilized people they appeared to be. But everyone knew the truth now. Everyone understood what was hiding behind that peaceful exterior. Humanity was not dangerous because they wanted to hurt anyone. They were dangerous because they were very, very good at it when they had no other choice. And once you became their enemy, once you threatened their people or harmed their families, you were not just fighting one person or one planet. You were fighting a species that had survived everything their homeworld could throw at them. A species that had clawed their way up from mud and stone to reach the stars. A species that had learned long ago that the best way to prevent violence was to make the cost of starting it absolutely unthinkable. Even the Hitmen knew this now. Even the assassins and the mercenaries and the criminals who made their living in the darkest corners of the galaxy. Targeting humans meant certain death. Not quick. Not clean. Not merciful. Just certain. And so the contracts went unfilled. The assassins walked away. The story spread from system to system, from species to species, from generation to generation. And humanity continued to smile and trade and negotiate and build, knowing that their reputation protected them better than any fleet ever could.